It's not here.
No.
Kicks out of town. No.
California,
Yeah. Colorado, isn't it?
California, I thought.
It's Inglewood, Colorado.
Like Los Angeles and.
We're live.
We are live. Good morning. I'm going to call the meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Park Commissioners to order. And I want to thank everybody for being here. It's a little overcast, but the colors in Cincinnati parks are gorgeous this time of year. If you haven't been out and enjoyed the park, now's the time to do it. It's beautiful. We will first, as we always do, we have a couple of speakers this morning that would like to address us. We do limit it to 2 minutes, but we welcome anybody that wants to come and speak. So our first speaker is Josephine Ward Zamat. Zambo, I'm gonna, I'll say Josephine. Come on up. You've got 2 minutes and welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
So my main concern on coming here today is Mount Airy Dog Park, Doris Day, Mount Airy Dog Park. I've been here since 2019 from the Cleveland Metro Park area. And I have a certain standard on how parks are supposed to look, run, operate. My main complaint that I'm coming to the board about is seating and overall look and appearance of Mount Airy Dog Park. So I sent an email last night to specifically bullet pointing these things.
Okay.
But basically there was eco-friendly year-round seating there that I asked, hey, could we do an update on it? Because they were like concrete. And I was like, okay, could we do some updating? Could we touch these up instead of getting rid of them type of situation? Very low maintenance, great amount number wise. There was about 12 benches in total. And they just ripped them up and threw them in a landfill in Mount Airy. I was hiking with my dog, found everything. And I was like, why didn't they just fix what was already there? It would have been cheaper, more cost efficient, more eco-friendly in general. Now they put, they bought 2, but they put a total of 6 picnic tables in Mount Airy. Definitely not enough. Definitely not enough. Barely enough for the people that go there, especially people who are disabled. There's a really nice ramp going up. So people who are in wheelchairs, especially like electronic ones, are able to get into the park with their dogs and what have you. And there's nowhere for people who are like elderly to sit. Very, very not comfy for them. So people will be like, oh, okay, you could have my seat. And they're like, oh, well, I don't have a seat, but that's fine. That's fine. So my aim is to find a eco-friendly way for seating, potentially something that is no to minimal maintenance. So put it in, maybe recycled plastic, maybe concrete again.
2 minutes.
Perfect. And that's it. That was
Okay.
my main complaint of coming today.
Well, we've now got, I think we've got your phone number on here. So you may get a follow-up, but it's something that
And her email address, if you emailed us last night. So
You got that? Perfect.
Okay.
I haven't seen it yet, but
Yes.
I've seen everything up till 5, but then that's the cutoff to know about it. But awesome. We just had a donation from the foundation. So we're working on the Doris Day Dog Park in the coming year.
Perfect. Elizabeth, she is caught in traffic. I filled out one of those cards for her. She
Okay,
should be here momentarily.
okay, well, we'll put her next to last. Thank you. Thank you, Josephine, for coming in. Anthony Polk, welcome back. Good to see you. Very good.
Very nervous, so
Oh, there's no. I hope we're not that intimidating.
And there are only 3 of us.
There's only 3 of us.
I have an idea, and that is to create a placescape at Mount Airy Doris Day Dog Park for both dogs and people. Something that would be lane friendly for Snoop or Sean Gaston, who happens to work there as a board member. And then also just, it would be a progressive flow of obstacles from one to the next that would essentially be able to strengthen a sense of self and character and tactile environment, everything. And you'd be able to develop athletes just by having a playscape just at your Mount Airy Dog Park. So.
Tell us a little more about your thoughts. I mean, how would you envision that looking?
So I have a email that I had sent last night. I don't know if we could.
Holidays, yeah, we only do it if possible. Yeah.
We'll still look at it. We just don't necessarily review it before 9 a.m.
All of those come to us, so they have to have a cutoff just so they can get everything to us before the meeting. So,
So yeah, there are some examples in that email for reference. I'm not sure if you'd like me to go into detail here. Basically, they would be eco-friendly, sustainable obstacles, similar to the seating arrangement that Josie had mentioned. However, you could integrate some seating alongside of this playscape. So that way.
Playscape for dogs or for like kids?
is it?
A
Yeah.
little bit of both.
Okay.
Right. So naturally speaking, whatever dogs are going to go on to, people are going to go on to, like, or cats or whatever, but it's a dog park. So you're going to expect dogs, kids, people, to be there. So.
Super.
Yeah.
Well, we will definitely, your email will be circulated to us. We'll look at it. We've talked a lot about dog parks over the past 3 years. And we do see it as community building, and it's not just a dog park for dogs to run around, but the benefits of people coming together and enjoying a park setting with their dogs. So that sounds very interesting. So we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. And just for reference also, I hail from Traverse City, Michigan. So I just moved here recently. It was in the last year. It was over in Chill, and yeah, it was a rough transition, but now that I'm right next to the dog park, the community has really lifted my spirits. And yes.
That's great to hear. Great to hear. Well, welcome to Cincinnati, and glad you found the parks. So
Appreciate it.
great. Thank you. So we'll move on with our meeting. If Elizabeth does show up, if you could, Josie, sort of go like this, so I know that's Elizabeth that walks in. We'll give her a couple of minutes too. Okay, with that, we'll move along to I'm going to thank Commissioners Castellini and Commissioner McCollum for being here this morning. 2 of our commissioners are absent, but we do have a quorum, so we will conduct important business today. And the first of which is very important, the approval of minutes. If you've had a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting, are there any additions, corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
And a second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. Our first,
Maybe if I can point a personal privilege before we can go into that.
absolutely.
And it occurs to me that for folks that are tuning in at home, or just for folks that read the minutes, I just want to get this in early. And that is to note at this October meeting that our December meeting will be 1 week early. We've mentioned it a couple of times. It's the kind of thing I would mention at the end of the meeting, but then you got to read the whole minutes, got to watch the whole meeting. So I just want to make sure everybody at home, everybody listening in, we're moving the meeting up to December 14th, which is the second Thursday, in order to make sure it's not on the 20th, the third Thursday, which is our normal meeting time. But that starts to get really close to Christmas time. It starts to get really close to people taking off. And we want to make sure that everybody has a chance to enjoy the holidays with their family and whatever travel plans they may have. So I just wanted to note that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, our first agenda item is related to our investment committee of the board. The park board only has one standing committee that's been appointed, and that is the investment committee. So today I want to just spend a little bit of time acknowledging and thanking our committee members. We have with us today 3 of our members, and if you want to come on up here, I'm going to put you on the spot. 4 members with Craig as well. Craig, you're coming up. You're part of this committee as well. Our committee is made up, I chair the committee, but then we have John Nyer, who you all know. John has been a member of our investment committee from the very start of our reconstruction of the committee. Steve Pullman is here. Steve is the CEO of the Greater Cincinnati.
Not yet, CFO.
I'm sorry. You know, I interchange those CFO, CEO, sorry, Mr. C. Being a financial guy, I always see the benefit of the CFO from Greater Cincinnati YMCA's is here. And Kevin Flynn, who needs no introduction, but Kevin, besides being a former city council person, also was a member of this park board. And Kevin has continued to serve with us on the finance committee and has been a real driver for this committee since we set it up. Scott King is here. Scott works with Western and Southern and joined our committee a couple years ago now and has been attending regularly. Our committee meets quarterly. We review on a quarterly basis all the information that comes in. Craig, obviously, as the park CFO, is a key member of this committee. And we meet on a quarterly basis, review all of the reports that come in from our fund managers. As you're aware, we have endowment funds that many of which are the Board of Park Commissioners are the trustees. So we're responsible. There are other ones that we are also just the beneficiary of, but we review all of the performance on a quarterly basis. We usually bring in one of the fund managers for each meeting to talk about how their investments, how they're going. This committee, since we put it together, we've done a lot of work. We rewrote the investment policy. We rewrote the distribution policy. We've evaluated, we sort of trimmed down the number of managers that we had to reduce fees as well as to give additional funds to those managers who have really served us well over the years. And we continue to evaluate, are we getting the right investments that we need, and are our fund managers doing the best job that they can for our committee? You'll see in the report that I issued that over the long run, the portfolio has performed quite well. We set in our policy that we were striving to reach a 5% return. And you can see over the past 5 years, we've actually achieved a 6.92% return on our money. We have grown since we took over those funds. It was about 16.8 million. And in 2017, it's grown to over 20 million after having distributed to the park board every year since then. So I wanted to bring this to your attention so that we have an opportunity to give you questions, ask the committee, also to thank the committee for all that they do for us. But I just like to open it up if you've had any questions concerning the report that we provided to you.
I'm just so grateful that we're not automatically taking 5% from each of these endowments and dumping it into that PNC bank account. Thank you very much. I was real tired of seeing that grow and grow and grow and not get spent. So this has been great. Thank you.
Maybe Kevin, you can, our approach to that, or
yeah, I think, we look at the beginning of each year, what the people with the crystal ball say. But our intent is always to not distribute as much as we're going to, spend. And we're not just dumping it into the checking account now. We've got a plan that perhaps wasn't there before. One of the other things, Jim, that you didn't mention is with Craig's help in organizing all of this, we were able to eliminate Mercer completely, which was like a $50,000 a year fee, all being done as part of Craig's regular reporting responsibilities to the board. So, I mean, I think that this finance committee, investment committee has done not only good stewardship of the funds, but also honoring the intent of those original donors and keeping the money separated from the city so it just doesn't get washed washed through, but really meets the intent of bettering the parks.
And Steve, you obviously are involved with endowments and trusts. We appreciate your help in helping us to benchmark. You want to add anything for?
Just that this is the nature of the work I do at the YMCA as well. I manage a portfolio that's about twice as big as this one. It's all the same investments, it's all the same people, it's all the same money managers. So this feels like very normal to me. It certainly has been a pleasure and honor to serve the last 5 years as if I had a choice. I think I was voluntold that I was going to be on the committee, but to be surrounded by committee members and staff persons that have no agenda other than to preserve park assets and make sure that they are there and generating money to take care of the park's good works. This is the most enjoyable committee that I serve on, for sure.
Scott, anything you would like to add? You're one of the newest members of our committee.
When my mother-in-law said, hey, you should think about doing this committee, I was thinking, man, this is going to be just boring as can be. And it's anything, but there's so many nuances and little details that you have to keep in the back of your mind of, well, that's why we can't do this with this fund because we can't. And so it's a very interesting committee. You learn a lot about the city's relationship with the parks and vice versa. And I'm proud to be on it. So
thank you. Well, and there's not enough that I can say about Craig. Craig has, as Kevin mentioned, we were paying an outside company $50,000 a year to do basically what Craig's doing for us now. Probably, Jason, don't expect $50,000 pay increase. Yeah, but Craig has stepped up. Craig is the one. He is the direct interface with all of our fund managers. He is the one that comes and presents all of the reporting to us. He does the consolidation of it and is just he is a valuable asset to the park board, and especially as us who work on the investment committee know the amount of work that he has to put in just to accumulate, manage. We sit in a meeting and we raise questions, and it's Craig that has to go back then to the fund managers and carries that message and gets the information back for us. So thank you, Craig, for all that you do for this.
Thank you for the kind words. And if anybody wants to go to investment committee, we have one coming up this coming Wednesday at 3:00.
I think not.
I think what part of the purpose of this presentation today is that you all are fine. You can joke about it, but you're financially astute. But it gives us an opportunity as a board to get into the minute details and to really look at and help us manage this versus having to do that as a park board. So it's very appreciative.
Bless you.
We also, besides these funds, I'll just mention, Kevin, we also are the beneficiary of 9 trusts that were set up with the Greater Cincinnati Foundation as part of the Bicentennial Commons. Mm-hmm. And that has a committee as well that reviews those funds. Kevin, fortunately for us, is a member of the Board of Visitors, which is the organization that has review of that. Anything you'd like to add with that?
Yeah, I think one of the other important pieces with the investment committee and also with this from the board's perspective in particular is one, knowing that these funds exist for particular purposes in particular parks, whether it's the levee clock up near Crone Conservatory or the Bicentennial Fountain down at the Commons. There are these particular funds that have been set up, many of which have grown far beyond what is needed for that particular use, but at least that use we know will be taken care of in perpetuity. And having Craig and Jim and Jason aware of these funds has allowed the staff to really focus the budget, knowing that they've got these funds to take care of these things so that funds are available for other parks that don't have these legacy type gifts involved, which allows all of the parks to be better. So it's not just the riverfront parks that are seeing the love because they've got dedicated funds. By having those funds, it's allowed us to do things
Exactly.
in other parks, which as a citizen of Cincinnati and a user of the parks, I appreciate greatly. And it makes it feel so much more fair to people that recognize, okay, yeah, this park's getting more money, but they've got a dedicated source of funds for that money, which then helps our Parks Foundation raise more money.
So,
It's good for the public to understand all of that too. And
yeah. Well, and it's important, there's a lot of discussions about trust funds and can those last in perpetuity? And I think it's important to know that the 20 million in trust funds that we have for the park board at the moment started at $3 million. Original, it's the same way with the bicentennial common funds. They started at 3.6 million and now is over $7.5 million. So those funds have grown, they continue to grow. It's with the help of people like this committee that we make sure that they're protected, invested wisely so that they're there. So again, I don't know if you have any other questions for them.
Just thank you so much
Yes.
for the work you put in and
not making us be in the weeds.
and for giving us the security of knowing that the parks is financially solvent and you guys are doing such a great job that we don't have to worry about it.
More than welcome.
Thank you, guys. And as Craig mentioned, meeting next week. So thank you. And feel free to stay for the meeting, but also I know most of you have real jobs to go to. So feel free to stay, but feel free to leave when you have to.
And thank you guys for your service. Continue.
Thank you. We'll take a quick 2 minutes for Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we held your card for you. You've got 2 minutes. Come on up and talk to us.
Traffic comes for us all.
I know. Your friends took care of you, so you've got your card. Elizabeth R. That's all we've got. Thank you.
Rain, RU10 if you need it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I use Doris Day Dog Park pretty much daily, sometimes twice a day. I've got a 1.5-year-old coon hound who's just wild and he needs it. It's a really nice space. A lot of people love it. It's well populated, like used frequently. There's probably about 20 of us that use it on a daily basis that I know of. Some of them are here. And it's really a great park and it has a lot of potential. The first order would be that there are no garbage cans with my fenced in area. I've heard that I've talked to some of the workers. They're a little afraid of dogs. They don't want to come in and empty the garbage cans. So what we have is a lot of like little bombs. People I think are protesting, but they don't realize it's myself and the other park people that clean up the poop bags that are left around the park. So that would be great if we could have garbage cans within. They had them right outside, which was better than it is now, but the dogs kind of get upset when we leave the park to go and then there's a chance for escape because they're upset that we're out and they're trying to get to us. So it's really kind of problematic. And there are no poop bags either supplied. We bring up Kroger's bags and things like that to use, but there's no supply by the park. It gets pretty dusty too. So we kind of move around to the different picnic tables, which are in various stages of decay. There's some like exposed wood, some dogs and bit the wood benches, and there's splinters and pieces like that around. So it would be awesome if we could get more permanent seating that cannot be chewed up by the dogs and leave debris. Besides that, I don't think I had a whole lot to say. It was nice, mostly garbage cans. That would be great. And maybe people that are not afraid to clean the garbage cans by coming into the park. Because I've heard that is the barrier there.
Perfect. Well, as we said to your other friends, that we will look at this. I know we've got some more information that came in through email, so we'll take a look. But it's a great asset that we have, and we'll assure you we'll take a look at it. Our friends at the Parks Foundation just made a donation to us for Doris Day Park, so we've got some funds as well that we're looking to put into that park.
And the dustiness was one of the things we've been talking about. So but anyways, it sounds like we have the beginning of a committee to help us figure out what the dog.
Absolutely, I'd be interested. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to come in. Okay, with that, we're moving on. We've got a great presentation. Jason, you want to tell us about what we're going to hear?
Yeah, of course. So if you invite Crystal Courtney up, the division manager of our Department of Natural Resources, as well as Drew Goebbels, Greg Torres, and Sean. Sam, sorry. All the letters were there. I just added it. Could have been any letter, I suppose. Anyways, but I'd like to invite them up to give a presentation. We're really excited about this. We accepted a donation from the foundation to help get this off the ground a month or so ago. It's really exciting. I don't want to step on the presentation itself, but if you want to sit down, you can, Crystal. We can even move some chairs up so everybody can sit down, or however you want to do it, whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay.
So thank you all for having us. Again, Crystal Courtney.
Greg Torres, Drew Goebel, and Sam Settlemeyer.
So Drew and Greg are on our conservation land management team. I'll get into here. So the Division of Natural Resources was formed in 2020, and it is one of 4 sections. The conservation and land management is one of 4 sections within it. Historically, this section didn't fully exist, right? So we had 2 tree crews and we had a district crew leader. And through this kind of redevelopment of the park board and our division, 2 full-time positions were given to us. And one was focused in trail management, one was focused in conservation management, and that's Drew and Greg. And so at the beginning, we kind of set out to just review the current initiatives and conditions of these major assets. So historically, there was invasive species management going on, but it was being done differently in the East District than it was in the West. And we would bring in massive amounts of volunteers to try to like blitz an area, but the stumps weren't getting sprayed. So essentially we were just pruning honeysuckle and just allowing issues to grow over time. So one of the first initiatives that we set out was just to review the current condition of our forest, of some of these past efforts that have been done, and then really develop standards around that. And the previous director's vision was to then take those standards and then train our staff to be able to take care of our forest and our trail system. The vision was that we would have 2 key leaders in those roles that would be overseeing it. And then those leaders would then be training staff to do that work, so that we would have essentially an army of 100 or 200 staff members that would be dedicated to it. So our team built out some of these initial standards for trail maintenance and management, as well as started really building specific land management plans, as well as really digging into what was happening, boots on the ground within our volunteer corps. So we have some organizations like Northside Green Space that have been managing Parker Woods and Buttercup Valley for over 20 years and have done a phenomenal job. But we're doing so kind of on their own. And it got to a point in 2019 where law determined that we weren't allowed to allow pesticide use for our volunteers. So we had to go through this whole process with the law department just to say like, okay, the city is self-insured, but what would it take for us to be able to add this liability? And so at that point, the foundation decided that they would fund liability insurance for up to 200 volunteers. And that if we trained volunteers to the standards that we would expect, or that we would train our own staff to, then they would be allowed to apply pesticide. And so that was kind of the kickoff of the trained service person certification process. It was very heavily modeled after what the Civic Garden Center was doing at Walnut Woods. And so really just trying to invigorate and mobilize a work base around that, and then give them the tools that they need to get the job done. So almost immediately after we started rolling out the trainings within our internal staff, we quickly realized that while the vision that our operations staff would be able to take on these roles was ideal, they just didn't have the capacity to. So really, we started to then shift gears and really focus in again on those dedicated volunteer groups that were already doing this work, like Burnett Woods and Northside Green Space, came together to formalize this plan for how we were going to do it. And so today, my team and Sam are going to go through kind of what this Cincinnati Conservation Steward Program looks like and where we are at. So with that, I'll turn it over to Drew.
Okay. Morning.
Morning.
So a little bit more context for this Cincinnati Conservation Stewards Program. Just looking at like all of our natural areas that we have and kind of thinking about what is the state of them. And so where do we come in and what do we do with them? We have 5,000 acres of land. 3,800 acres of that is forest or natural areas. Okay. Most of our historic labor and energy and time has been focused on the smaller amount of that acreage, right? So the lawns, the buildings, the facilities, that stuff. There's a lot of interaction with that stuff that makes sense. We're focused on that other portion of the land, the bigger portion. And we find it in a state that's pretty degraded overall, for a lot of reasons. We're an urban park system. There's been development. There's invasive species are a huge problem, right? Everybody is probably familiar with the big deferred maintenance report, right? Like $70 million. We have all these things to fix. How do we go about that? That's easy to kind of digest as, wow, that's a big issue. Like, let's put some resources into that. This is kind of a similar thing and can be looked at in a similar way. We have deferred maintenance, only it's with the natural resources, right? So we've been very busy over the last few years trying to address that issue. We have 2 full-time staff, myself and Greg Torres, and then 5 seasonal staff who are out every day planning, assessing, and working on these issues. And we're also working with many volunteers and volunteer organizations that are getting off the ground to help us tackle this. And to get into a little bit of kind of how that plays out, we have kind of 3 buckets of activity, work, parties that are working together that we're actually to coordinate. So obviously we have the staff that I just mentioned, and we're doing some of the more specialist tasks, right? So setting out the projects, assessing the areas, coordinating the different groups that are working in here. So the volunteer organizations like Crystal was mentioning, our own staff, regional staff that can come in and help us, not as much as we originally thought, but when they can. And then also on this chart, you'll see, so the top is kind of what we can do. And then the red is kind of like our weak points, right? So the weak point for the staff is obviously that we're pretty small, right? So we can only be so many places, do so much stuff physically ourselves. The volunteers, however, are all over the city. We're very blessed to have very committed volunteers that love our parks. They're very knowledgeable as well, right? And so a lot of what we've tried to do is kind of meet them where they are, listen to them, and then put them to work that makes sense, work to a plan as we can, right? As much as we can handle. And they have a lot of special abilities and the ability to pull together things that we can't do on our own, right? Since we can't be everywhere, just as we heard earlier, we had some citizens coming in telling us about, hey, we're seeing these things at the dog park. This is the way that it's being used. Well, the people in those areas have site-specific knowledge that none of us are ever going to have, right? They live right next to the area. They're going to see that place every week in perpetuity. They can inform us, they can inform staff, they can inform what we're doing, and they are informing it. So we're listening to them. But historically, we've put volunteers to work on more simplified tasks because they're only with us for a couple hours. But they've asked us for more. They've asked us for more engagement. Can we do more than honeysuckle? Can we do seed collection? Can we do X, Y, Z, right? But how do you put them to those tasks if you're only interacting with them, on this event or that event? It's hard to do. And so we've been looking for a more robust way to train them, a more robust way to organize their work. I didn't mention contractors, but that's always brought up in here. How do they fit into this? Yes, they can have special equipment. They can work on special projects, but often that's a more short-term commitment that doesn't have those advantages of the other two labor forces that we have, right? The staff, which have systems knowledge of how the parks actually work, how operations plays into it, and the volunteers who have more site-specific knowledge and a longer-term commitment, right? So we're trying to balance all these together. And the middle one, the volunteer component, we're really happy to talk about today, the Cincinnati Conservation Stewards Program, which is taking that to kind of the next level with the help of the foundation, which we should thank for support from that. And I won't go further on it because you guys are going to talk.
Good morning. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam Settlemeyer and I'm the Conservation Program Manager at the Civic Garden Center. So we are an entity that is housed on a public park. We are at Houck Botanic Gardens. And so we've been working with parks for many years in the co-management and co-maintenance of this park. And more recently, we have gotten involved in the restoration of Walnut Woods in Evanston, next to Walnut Hills High School. So we led that effort in starting to kind of engage volunteers and get them in kind of involved in that process of removing invasive plants and restoring a space that was once pretty blighted into a space that is now has trails, has a lot more of an open feel, a much more healthy forest feel to it. It's regularly getting utilized by students. And in that process, we learned a lot about how to engage volunteers and how to really take a volunteer-driven approach to restoring a forest. And as these guys already laid out to you, we have a pretty big problem with invasive plants here in Cincinnati, and we're not alone in that, but this problem is really complex. And if you go to many of our parks, they do have significant invasive pressure. All of our forested parks have some level of invasive pressure, many of which are pretty overrun already with invasive plants. And not only is that ecologically not great for the forest, but it makes it pretty unenjoyable to recreate. You go to many trails in places like Mount Airy and you're buffered with honeysuckle on either side of the trail. You can't see off the trail for more than 5 feet and you feel unsafe getting to go and enjoy one of Cincinnati Parks' most valuable resources, which is its forests. And so many of these parks are heavily underutilized and we have this huge opportunity now to really engage a community of people who are eager to help restore these spaces, not only because they care about the ecological impact that these forests can and should have in our city, but because they have the opportunity to really bolster this next generation of park advocates, of park stewards, and get people using our forests in a way that is occasionally utilized. I live in Northside. We have some beautiful forests there and people use them constantly, but a lot of these forests that are overrun with the honeysuckle, we're not really utilizing to the degree that we should be. So this program that we're talking about today has been years in the making, right? Through the work that Civic Garden Center has been doing, through the work that groups like Burnett Woods and Northside Green Space have been doing, we have been thinking through how can we engage volunteers in a more meaningful and more impactful way in these forests. The crew here is at capacity. We need to be able to help, provide additional resources to make sure that the work is happening. And we need to make sure that people are going to help us maintain these spaces over time. It's easy to go out and remove the honeysuckle, but then there are another 10, 15 invasive plants that are happy to fill in those gaps. And if we don't have a dedicated crew that is committed to that restoration for many, many years to come, a group of advocates that are helping us flag those really problematic species and make sure that we're aware of them, then all the work that is happening right now in our parks is going to be lost. And we're not going to have beautiful forests that people can come and enjoy and can be a cornerstone of what Cincinnati Parks is. So this program is really the formalization of education and training to be able to engage volunteers in a meaningful way, make sure that not only do they feel supported and feel well educated in the work that they're trying to do, Many of whom they are coming to us wanting to do this work. We're not seeking them out. They're coming to us and saying, hey, this is a problem and we need your help to figure out how to do it. But also to make sure that they're following practices that are safe, that are, adhering to the knowledge that these guys have and make sure that this work is sustainable. So you'll see here that over the last couple of years, as we've been thinking through this, as we've been talking to community members, we've learned a lot. And even in 2022 alone, we've already had over 1,000 unique volunteers who have contributed more than 8,000 volunteer hours in parks. An incredible amount of time and effort. Places like French Park and Mount Airy are seeing huge growth in engagement and people who want to make sure that those parks are getting restored. And not only are they removing invasives, but now they're going back and planting good native trees and really starting to establish these healthy habitats. But they want more, and we want to be able to keep up with them, right? Honeysuckle is really what we've been able to tackle so far. And as I said, that's a pretty easy plant to take out and manage. Some of our other species like our porcelain berry, like our Japanese stiltgrass, they are far more problematic and far more difficult to get volunteers engaged in that restoration of. So as we are working through this program, what we are proposing and what we've gotten our funding to start to do and will continue to do is to develop education, to develop training that will allow volunteers to not only work independently in parks, but to also lead other volunteers in parks. You can see, I think in your packet included today is a schedule of the remaining events for just this season. And you'll see that every single weekend, there are 4, 5, 6 events happening in parks, which is incredible. It's great to see that kind of engagement, but the staff cannot keep up with being there to make sure that those volunteers know what's going on and make sure that they have the kind of knowledge that they need to go out and not cut the wrong plants, but cut the right plant. So what we're going to be doing is working to provide that training on how volunteers can identify plants, how volunteers can lead other volunteers safely and effectively, how volunteers can help us in the management of these spaces over time. So this program, while complex and while it's going to take us some more time to figure out, has really started to come together and take shape. And we've seen a lot of interest from our volunteers in learning more and taking on bigger leadership roles. As they do that, we've learned more and can make some adjustments. And we start to really engage folks in the removal and the management of these spaces so that this work, again, is sustainable, but also that we're building a community of folks around this work. The work is going to take a long time. It's not going to be easy, especially when we think about some of our larger parks. And so as they have more resources, as folks come and have a really positive interaction at that park, they're more likely to come back and continue volunteering. And this whole entire program is built on volunteer retention. It's not a one-time volunteer who comes and then leaves. We need volunteers who are engaged over a number of years, and therefore they learn, continue learning, come back, share that knowledge with other volunteers. And over time, we have a knowledgeable cohort at each park under the CPACs that can help execute this work. So as we're thinking through this, we will have several different training programs with hopefully more coming in the coming years. We're going to have ongoing educational opportunities. Things like plant identification take a lot of time, take a lot of nuanced education. And really the main takeaway from today is that we're here to try to engage this community of individuals who is really focused on better restoring and sustaining the work that's happening in our parks. And Greg is going to cap things off with that.
Sure. Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for giving us a chance to talk on this. So next steps, no takeaways. This is where I'm supposed to talk. So yeah, a lot of the forest is kind of degraded. You've heard that already. If you've been in our parks, some of the trails are just tunnels of honeysuckle. It's very uncomfortable to walk through. I've always advocated that, my old park system that I used to work in, we had a motto that says, it starts in parks, right? So if you're a kid in a bike, if you're a retiree learning how to bird watch, your activities, your recreational activity starts in parks. But all these higher level things that we want to do programmatically aren't really possible if the natural resource that you're depending upon to build those programs are in poor condition. So part of what Crystal's objective with creating conservation land management is to have a crew to actually start focusing on the natural resource itself and start developing methods to care for these spaces. so that we can do some education for children or do actual bird watching in a restored habitat where the birds will actually be. So it's really important if we're going to have these great ideas and good programs for our community to have a good natural resource base to base it off of. We've been kind of creative in finding solutions, considering our small staff and the huge issue that we're dealing with in our forested areas. We've come up with different strategies, kind of creative and out of the box thinking, I think, to use different facets, partners, techniques, and even our volunteers. We've listened to our volunteers, as we've mentioned here already. A lot of our volunteers have already been doing this work. We've talked to them. We've communicated with them. We've listened to their concerns, their desires, and off of that, this program was built. This is largely a program built around educating the community through our volunteers. Once we've invested some education into our volunteers, the retention goes right up. I mean, they keep coming back. And also the kind of community building of actually doing work next to your neighbors, right? On a certain project, communicating education and ideas around what we're doing so that they actually understand why they're there. Like, what's the big picture of what they're doing? Having land management plans so that we can actually point to them. This is the small piece that you're putting together today to help us on this bigger project overall throughout the city. Those are really important. And we've kind of set up the framework to use our volunteers to the best effect, to partner up with strategic partners to really magnify what we're able to do. And in that way, what I think all of us want to see is Cincinnati become one of the greenest cities in the country, right? We have the assets there. There's tremendous forests in the city, unlike a lot of other cities in America. But I think to make that shift to actually achieving that goal of being a very green city has to be a cultural shift. And through that, we do it through learning and education. Once people understand, I put it right here, from learning comes understanding of the problems that we're facing. Once people understand, people will start to care about their specific park or the natural resource that they're concerned with. And from the caring, they want to take some kind of action. We hear a lot of issues around the environmental problems. This is a way for the community to actually get involved with managing and helping us manage these problems for our city and for the green spaces that we have around us. So that's why we've named it Cincinnati Conservation Stewards. The thing is building a community of conservation. So that's basically where we're at with this. So thanks.
Okay, can I have one question that nobody's addressed this? I assume that in this training, you have a manual that you hand people that has pictures of these invasive species so they can be, take it home with them and really be able not only see it in the real, but also help them to remember. I make that assumption.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's something that we're developing now. This was funded just a few months ago. And so we're putting together the curriculum now. We have already, I think, outlined a series throughout the year of both educational engagements. This Sunday, if you want to meet me at French Park, I'll be giving a hike to our volunteers to teach them about our ecosystem there. But also the volunteer engagement, the actual work days themselves incorporate a lot of the hands-on piece that you're mentioning. So yeah, we will be developing more of this curriculum as we move into the next years. There's a lot to cover and we want to take baby steps with our volunteers so they get it right before we unleash them out into the woods and have them addressing certain problems.
So I think what he's speaking to really is multifaceted. So there's a classroom portion, there's a handbook portion, but really people learn best hands-on. And
true.
And that's what keeps them coming back as well. So really the details of the program. So in your packet, you also have the proposal that was put together. So that's what was presented to the foundation for funding for this year. And you can see in that kind of the structure of the program, which we did skip over this slide here. But essentially this first cohort, we were working directly with 6 CPACs to kind of help us perfect that model. And then in the packet, you'll see our goal is to essentially train the trainers, right? So we will have a dedicated site leader, which naturally happens anyways with within an organization, that you have somebody that's stepping up to lead the charge. So our team is going to train them in how best practices in volunteer management. Our team in partnership with Rocky's team and Crystal Johnson-Roberts and all the good work that she does. And then from there, some people don't really want to be in a leadership position. They just want to show up and work. But at the same time, they can either be just a trained service person led by the site leaders, led by the other trained service persons, or they can become an invasive species. is outlined in that as well. So those folks that really want to know more or already have a background in natural resources and have either retired or are taking time at home can put their skills to work for us in the field. Because again, as Drew mentioned, you don't work, we are a small team. We have 3,800 acres, 80% of the entire park system is forested, and the majority of this land is traversed by our volunteers. So.
Well, the other thing, you have to put a dollar figure on how much that is saving the parks by these volunteers.
It's around.
I mean, it's one thing to say hours, 8,000 hours, but it would be not a bad thing for the community to know the dollars that these people are saving.
We just spent $20,000 at Linway Park, clearing invasive species around the perimeter, and that was less than an acre. So that in and of itself is a multiplier. And that's also a part of this kind of pilot year is the metrics for tracking success. So we're really formalizing, like, what does success look like? Success looks like for me, and I think for our team, that as Greg alluded to, that somebody can walk into the forest, walk on a trail system that is pristine and can see at least 20 feet each way, at least. From there, it's really preserving our most precious resources in parks, our California woods, our caldwells, our large nature preserves that have been endowed to us over time. And honestly, as this issue has evolved, I mean, honeysuckle invasive species weren't here as much as they are now when you were growing up and running the forest. So it's an ever evolving problem that, just like mowing grass, will take annual maintenance, annual establishment in order to keep that resource pristine over time.
And it's too bad the deer don't like it.
Real quick, I want to bring Rocky up to speak. Crystal Johnson Roberts, who heads our volunteers, is a huge part of this team, and unfortunately, she is out ill today. So Rocky is the communications, education, and volunteers division manager. So volunteers fits under that. So I just want to give Rocky a chance to kind of speak on the volunteer component.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, and it reminds me of that children's book, The Missing Piece. So the missing piece here is Crystal. Unfortunately, couldn't be here today. But yeah, this it's sort of looking at it big picture. There's a lot of different ways that our volunteers work to help us, whether it be Crown Conservatory, Explore Nature. In the past, as you know, we've done a lot of very large volunteer projects at parks with, say, Fifth Third, or some of our wonderful corporate partners want to come and do a cleanup day. That's great, and we're thrilled to have it, and it's all extremely important. But what we're talking about here in the collaboration that we've put together is really the future. Because when you look at impact and the impact we're going to be able to make through these, as I like to call them, super volunteers that we're creating, is going to be tremendous. We've already seen it working in a number of parks, but we simply don't have the staff to go out and support the work that volunteers in the community want to do. So this program very cleverly harnesses that. It says, you know what, we know you're committed, you're smart, we know you understand the value of this. We're going to train you, we're going to educate you, and then we're going to come up with some sort of like badge system that they'll be able to earn so the community can go out and lead volunteer efforts and then sustain the work that happened. You all got to see Glenway Park. We came out and did the clearing. In 3 or 4 years, that'll all be grown back if we don't have an effort coming back in to manage it and clear it out. So this in many ways is the future. Crystal's so excited about this, and I just couldn't let it pass without her. She would have been here if she wasn't feeling ill. But just tremendous effort, and I'm confident really good things are going to come out of this down the road.
Awesome.
I got a couple comments. We spend a lot of time in our monthly meetings talking about deferred maintenance and the great work Joel and his staff is doing to maintain our parks. Those are buildings, structures, roads, sewer lines many times. But I really appreciate you guys coming before us and reminding us that we have deferred maintenance as well. And we've got assets, and to your point, 80% of our parks is the natural woodlands. And so Crystal and Jason, thank you for continuing to remind us that there's so much more. We have deferred maintenance in our woods and in our parks and our greenland.
And I'll say, as soon as a building is designed and installed, it begins to depreciate in value. And you'll be repairing it again and again, right? So the forest and our forest in general, when a tree is planted or when you have a forest that you're maintaining, that investment grows in benefit exponentially over time. And if we are going to be a innovative, climate resilient city, preserving these natural resources are essential to current and future generations.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we've got Drew and Greg here that no matter where I go, what event, they're there. So I know that you guys are really working directly with the community. What I hear going on like at French Park and what continues to go on in Mount Airy and all of our parks. I know you guys can't be 24/7. So thank you for what you're doing. And you're making a big impact with the volunteers and everything. And then the partnership with the Civic Garden Center. I mean, this is how we do it. Besides, and this is so perfectly lined up with what we have to do as parks and in all of our parks. We can't do it ourselves. So the volunteer work, but then also the organization, especially organizations like the Civic Garden Center. We've worked so closely and you're helping us with spearheading this, but it's all the other organizations at our Trail Fest out at Mount Airy Forest, bringing together like-minded people for the common good of Cincinnati parks is great work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
These guys are really the backbone. And I'm sorry, Crystal couldn't be here, but this has been like a brainchild, I think, for 5 years, maybe Drew forever. But, but thank you. It is absolutely an honor to serve. And we couldn't do it without our expert staff and our partners in this realm.
Well, continue to remind us whatever we can do. Rocky and his group, what you're doing as far as getting the word out and corralling the volunteers. The train the trainer approach is perfect because you can't do it all. So thank you and continue to remind us and come to us with what we can do to help you.
And what time Sunday is French Park?
So the hike is at 10 o'clock. If you want to stick around for the workday, it'll happen right after the hike.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hope
Thank
to
you.
see you all. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good job.
President.
Yes, ma'am, sir.
I have been in communication with Commissioner North. It turns out that I somehow there was some miscommunication between me and some of her team, but she'll be here in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So
Super. Police quarterly report. We have that in our packet. We don't have someone from the police here today, but we've got all of the details.
I was actually going to present on it if you're okay with that.
That's great. I was wondering who can help us walk through this.
Sorry, I'm writing up some notes for Commissioner North, so she knows what she is. So we'll run through it real quick. Obviously, it's always more helpful to have the police here to review this themselves. But a couple quick things to note. One is that calls for service on page 41. It looks like you can barely see it in the blue down here, but the first page of stats. If you calls for service are up a bit year over year. Which could be concerning, but I would call that a positive thing. And the reason I would say it's positive is that we're encouraging folks to report things they see. As you all know, we don't have a parks park rangers, or we don't have any enforcement mechanism ourselves. We can't give out tickets. We can't, all we can do is kind of use our soft skills to encourage people not to disobey and not to break the park rules. So when people call in, we encourage them to report these things. These calls for service are how the police department make decisions about where they deploy resources. So actually, while calls for service being up could be seen as alarming, it's actually good because it means that we're getting stats in there that aren't just going ignored, that the police will have to respond to, and it will help them make positive decisions. I'd also like to point out that it says in the bottom, it says what percentage of calls for services are happening in parks versus citywide. And you can see that it's about, at best, 1.6%, 1.7% in 2003. Remember, parkland accounts for 10% of the entire city. So if you're in a city park, you are 20% as likely to have to make a call for service than if you're in anywhere else in the city. So obviously that is the generalization, but for folks that have concerns about Cincinnati parks are in fact safe. And this is a data point that you can use to show that, right? Calls for service are much less likely in our 10% of the city than in the other 90%. You flip over to the next page and you can see where the calls for services happen. The two or the 3 or 4 outliers at the top are the waterfront parks. We've talked about this several times. We've had a huge increase in people coming to our waterfront parks overnight. We've had several really unfortunate incidents that happened in our waterfront parks, Smale and Sawyer Point, Yateman's Cove over the summer. Again, we've been encouraging increased calls for service to make sure the police know this has happened. Jenny and I, along with our waterfront parks team, have spent a lot of time with the police department over the last couple of months and the city manager's office. They're taking this very seriously, and we're looking at a lot of strategies to try to help figure out what can be done to continue to discourage this kind of activity and try to continue to make sure that these calls for this don't need to happen. I should also point out that the foundation's been involved in some of the conversations as well and is willing to partner with us to come up with some solutions. We can look at kind of the top 10 parks again. But if you flip over to page 46.
Jason, do you know a quick question on like an Eden Park where we're sitting today, where it's right smack in the middle, but number 5, what are the types of calls that come in primarily?
Does not look like that. It's broken down by the.
I'm sorry to
part
put you on this.
I don't know. I do not know that.
Gotcha.
My guess is it relates to breaking park rules, probably most likely up near Twin Lakes, which is where we hear the most from citizens that are
Right. I think that is frequently.
in that area, yeah. And sometimes it's just a difference of how certain people want to use the park. There are some folks that want to show up to a park, play loud music and have fun. Other people that wish the park were more serene and there was a different vibe to certain areas of the park. And so I think that probably leads to some of that.
And drug use is another issue at Eden Park.
So if we skip over to, we can discuss kind of the top 10. But if we skip over to page 47, you can see that the offenses are actually down citywide year over year, up slightly quarter over quarter, but 19 to 21 is statistically even. But then also the thing I want to point out is the direct patrols, which I believe that's me making a little bit of a guess, but I think DIRPAT means direct patrols.
Yeah,
pretty sure.
I read that somewhere.
I will at least caveat. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's what that means. And as you'll note, those have increased both year to date and also quarter over quarter. So that shows the police department is taking this very seriously and is really trying to help us with the safety in our parks. So I think those 2 very encouraging stats that I'd point out. And those are kind of, again, my quick overview of the stats and my interpretation of them from the police department. But
on page 45, one thing that I recall from quarter 2 was there was a glitch in their system that sent out a whole lot of calls from both the zoo as well as Riverfront Park.
And you can see that on page 43. There's a spike.
Yeah, and that was a glitch in systems of some sort, so.
Correct, and I believe it happened on the weekend of Pride in Waterfront Park, which we already had hundreds of thousands of people down there, and then there was some sort of a Verizon glitch, I believe, but I don't remember. Android phones.
Jason, I don't know if you want me to publicly bring this up or not, but I'm going to. Yes. You talked about maybe creating an ambassador program that would help the police.
So this has been one of our ongoing, as we talk to the city manager's office and the police department and city council, it's been one of our ongoing kind of discussion points about what is the solution. I don't know that the police department or the city administration is interested in starting any sort of a park ranger or park police department or even division. And so what we had talked about is the possibility of having some sort of an ambassador, some sort of a staffing program that could help out with that. And it's an idea that we're kind of workshopping through and seeing if it's something that makes sense. So it's one of the things that are on the table, but it would need a pretty significant funding source to have, to be able to cover with in any meaningful way, all of our, 130 plus parks and park spaces. But it's definitely something that we're workshopping.
It's on the table. Okay.
Well, given
One of the
that,
things the city's done, sorry, Mr. President, one of the things the city's done is they've tried to, and there's an acronym for it, and I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but they are investing in some response teams that are non-police. And so for non-violent situations, they have started a program that has, and I don't think it's huge. I think it might be just 5 to 6 people, but I think they're starting to build that out, and hiring for that and creating it. And that's for the rest of the city, the other 90% of the city spaces, to kind of intervene in some of these situations first before police officers can come. So, and I think that's the model we want to try to piggyback on and see if either we can expand that to respond to parks as well, or if there's some sort of a park model we can develop to kind of go in line with that. So those are the discussions we're having.
Okay. Good. I'm glad it's ongoing.
Yep, absolutely. All right.
with that, any other questions on parks that make Jason go back and answer, please? I mentioned it last quarter, but I'll mention it again. I have noticed as I drive through parks, more presence, or I seem to have seen more police patrols in our parks. So I think the message is clear, and I think the city is recognizing that. Okay, well then let's move on to our next area with planning and design.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning, Joel.
Good to see you all.
Great sneakers.
Thank you. Those Jenny's actually,
They're actually nicer than Kicks today. Oh, Kicks not here.
the only time they'll be nicer than Kicks. Great to see you all this morning. I have 2 action items. There were going to be 3. If you would like, I can postpone those till Commissioner North gets here. I'm sure she may have discussion on those. I'm not sure. It's totally up to you. I can go out of order and do.
She should be here anytime now. So,
Yeah, so go out of order and we'll save those.
All right, well then I'll start with an update on the one that we pulled from the report. Smale Riverfront Park, we have a well cleaning and pump replacement project that was going to be up for your consideration today. We received a quote really late on Tuesday. Jason and I looked at it, questioned a lot of things on that, and decided that it's not time yet to put that before you all. Go ahead. Do you have something?
we're still going to do the. Okay,
Yes.
excellent.
So encompassed in that quote were actually 2 quotes that we combined under Megan to try for efficiency and mobilization. The well cleaning portion of that has tripled in cost over the past 4 or 5 years. So that's pretty much unacceptable to me. We're going to go back to the drawing board and try to bid those cleanings a different way. So that is why that's not before you all today. The critical path portion of this to make sure our facilities continue to run are the pumps. That's a much smaller portion of the money, $37,000 for the 1 quote that we've received so far. We're going to go back and get 2 additional quotes for that to make sure we're getting the correct price and move forward on those pumps. At present, there is 1 pump, Christian Moorline, and 1 that runs Anderson Pavilion, 550 gallons per minute to include the features and all of those things. We don't have any current redundancy, and the loss of any more pumps would make it so that we have to kind of pick and choose which amenities we can feed during that time. So that part is actually really critical, and we're going to go ahead and move forward trying to quote those pumps and get it. But the cleaning was such a substantial change from the last time we had it done that we're going to take a step back and go back and bid this a different way to make sure we're getting the right prices.
And Joe, what's the function of the pumps?
All 4 of these pumps essentially run the water, HVAC system, and the heating for both Anderson Pavilion and the Christian Moorline Logger House. And some of the features, the pump features, like how water circulates through some of the fountains, those kind of things. All of that is run through these 4 pumps, 65 feet deep. 2 of them are 20 horsepower pumps. 2 of them are 50 horsepower pumps. 1 of each is down. The 50s serve Anderson Pavilion. The 20s serve Christian Moorline Logger House. So if we lose the 50, essentially we have no recourse in how to keep either of those facilities operated. That is the critical path. We're going to take another look at the well cleaning to see if we're doing it the right way, to see what we should anticipate to spend on that and how often we should spend that. So we're taking a dive back and making sure that we're spending our money responsibly while still addressing and making sure that we're keeping our commitments to keeping the Moorline Logger House running efficiently. So that's what we're doing with that item. And that's why we struck it from this meeting. We totally plan on going through with the pumps in the next month to get those ordered. So we don't have a lapse in service whatsoever, but the cleaning will come back to you all once we evaluate it, make sure we're doing the right things to keep that system.
And this is another example of how we're shifting, how we're thinking about things. And it's in two ways. One, Smale Park is now 10 years old. And so some of these things that were installed have been kind of running and doing well, but they're at kind of a critical part of starting to need more service and more repairs, which is just true of anything, right? You buy a car, works really well for a while, and then slowly but surely it starts to need a little bit more tender loving care. But then also changing how we address these things, which is when something breaks, kind of fixing it right the first time and fully. One of the things that I was surprised to hear was that there's been a pump that's been down for several years. One of the 4 pumps has just been broken for a while, and we haven't necessarily needed it. So we've just worked with 3 pumps. Well, then when the 3rd pump goes down, now we're at this point where if either other pump goes down, and we've been at this point for a month or 2 as we've gotten these quotes and gotten this set up. We're at this point where it's like, well, now we're in a little bit more of an emergency state. And so we're going to get these 2 pumps fixed, and then we're going to look at, and then one of the pumps was replaced a year or 2 ago. So that's relatively new. But then we're going to look at the 4th pump relatively soon too, over the next year, to kind of make sure that we're getting in front of these things instead of waiting for them to break, and certainly not leaving anything broken for too long if it's for such critical infrastructure. So sorry.
Yeah, we're also aware that doing the cleaning separately of the pumps presents its own challenges. And we're going to make sure when we order these pumps that if the cleaning needs to happen beforehand, we're already rescoping and bidding that work before we put the pump in. But at least we'll have the pumps on hand and negate that lead time. So that is why we're doing this in this manner, going ahead and getting the pumps to make sure we can keep the Logger House and Anderson Pavilion running with heat. So
to review, we got the quote back. It was $173,000, which was much more expensive than we expected. That was $37,000 for the 2 new pumps and about $110,000 for the cleaning. But we were using the 3rd-party agreement in Megan, which meant there was another $25,000 of kind of project management fees on top of that. It just didn't add up. So we threw it into the report and got it over to you because, again, this is a critical thing. But then as we thought about it throughout the week and have talked about other strategies, we've taken a step back and said, what we're going to do is get 2 additional quotes for the pumps. And then that, because it will be under $50,000. We know it'll be no more than $37,000. That's an under $50,000 repair. We'll be able to move forward with that relatively quickly. We don't need board approval on that. Although if you'd like to vote on it, we're always looking for validation, but we'll get those taken care of right away. The $110,000 for the cleaning, there were 2 things. One is it was way too expensive. It was much more than we expected. It might come back at that. We don't know, but it just was out of whack. The other thing is that we have not been cleaning these wells on a regular basis. Again, they were new. Maybe there's some lag time where they need it more now, but we know that we need to get this on an every year, every other year ritual of cleaning these. And so what we want to do in this bidding out that separately is we want to ask, what should we be doing? What is the ongoing cost? Because if this is $100,000 a year in cleaning wells, we need to have a broader conversation about, is this the proper technology to serve this function down there? Or should we make a different investment rather than commit to every 2 years cleaning these wells at $100K? So we want to learn more about that. So that's why we've taken that step back. And then by slowing down a bit, we don't have to use a 3rd-party agreement, which just off the top saves us that $25,000.
yeah,
So
very similar to how we're switching the old filtration system in the same system, essentially for the new sand filters. That is much more efficient, way easier to work on. We can get parts for the things.
At the Main Street pumps, which we
Yes.
last month.
Correct. So very, very much the same thing. And we're addressing efficiencies or inefficiencies. Make sure we're maximizing our maintenance dollars and not just wasting. So that's why we pulled the well cleaning portion of this off of the agenda for today.
A great example of how we're moving fast to address emergency problems, but we're also constantly thinking and making sure that we're doing the right path and making sure that we're poking holes in it, or at least trying to see that we're on the right track.
Great. Do you all have any questions for that?
No.
Okay, I wanted to back up 1 second and introduce my new engineer intern. This is Ian Cummings. He joined our team on October 2nd. He's already an engineer intern. That's not a co-op, that is a designation. Essentially, that means he's already passed one of his 2 tests to become a professional engineer like me. So I'm more than excited to have him on board. He's already making a contribution and wanted to welcome him to the team and let him introduce himself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ian Cummings. I grew up in Westwood, around that area, and now I live in Priceville. So like hearing all about Mount Airy was pretty cool because I went there a lot when I was growing up. So yeah, really excited. A lot of really good memories at the parks. Really good memories.
You're welcome, Ian.
Welcome. Thank you.
There you go. Yeah. Teammates.
It makes me smile. I also want to say thanks to Derek and his staff for everything they did to help guide him through the process. I know it's not easy. I've been there before, but we're happy to have him and excited to get him on so many cool projects all over the board. So
Yeah.
I don't think you've been bored yet, have you, Ian?
No.
That's good. That's right. We're more than excited to have another engineer. All right, I will back up to the action items then, if that is all right with you all.
Sure.
I have two today. They're listed here. The first one is this Sawyer Point Sand Volleyball Courts. We mentioned this to you all a couple months ago, but weren't sure about the funding. I know that in the past month, BOV has agreed to provide funding for those. So the quote that you see before you includes removal of the old nets and the bases that those are cast in and replacement with all new equipment. It does not include sand. That was pulled out to a different thing. I know that there was talk of that originally including sand. That is not the case in this quote. We are recommending award to Pruce Construction under their term contract for play space improvements in the amount of $65,483. I've included all of the new equipment spec sheets in the packet just for you all to look at if you want to see them. Do you all have any questions?
The BOV funding. I know you know how this works.
Yeah.
But I don't know how this works.
I'm happy to update you on that.
Okay.
The Board of Visitors the Board of Visitors was created after the bicentennial in 1988. There was about, I think it was like $700,000 of leftover money, and it was given to the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. They created the Board of Visitors, 3 appointees by the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, 2 by the mayor, to use the proceeds of that fund to fund Cincinnati Parks, or to fund Sawyer Point and Yateman's Cove, which is collectively Bicentennial Commons. Sorry, just Sawyer Point. Sawyer Point is Bicentennial Commons. Yateman's Cove, we call that Waterfront Park, or that we kind of consider them one park. But so just within Sawyer Point. Many years ago, since Greater Cincinnati Foundation has a policy where they kick off 4.75% out of the funds every year. Previous staff and administration decided to allow that fund to build up with one specific purpose in mind. Last year, working with President Gatz, or right before I came on board, President Gatz was working with the Board of Visitors to try to access some of that money for some other priorities. So when I started last September, there's 2 meetings a year, the Board of Visitors. We were able to convince them to give us $75,000 towards some improvements at pickleball. Continuing conversations with them this year, we were able to convince them to give us the entire 4.75% that spins off this year for operations of Sawyer Point, and that includes capital projects and others. And this volleyball replacement was one of the projects we presented to them as something that's needed there. The volleyball courts are right next to pickleball courts and get a ton of people to come down there, and have just been in need of some repair for a bit now. So
are you thinking that our approach going forward will be to be proactive with that board and propose opportunities for funding?
correct. And for some of the funding that has been saved up, it was dedicated towards the Gateway sculpture statue, and they wanted to do kind of a big several $1 million improvement to that statue. In discussions with them, we've decided to do some immediate repairs and then have more of a long-term discussion about how to tackle a several $1 million project, but to do some more painting and some more metal polishing and metal refurbishment there in order to do some immediate fixes and start to access some of those dollars now.
What's the approximate amount of 4.75%?
Currently, there's basically a checking account of about 1.3 million
That's what's been
set aside.
accumulated.
Correct.
But what's 4.75%? Is it
Each year,
4.75%?
so it's 4.75% of the preceding 20 quarters profit, or I'm blanking on the word,
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Trailing balance.
Trailing.
2023, that equated to $250,000
For 1 year.
for 1 year.
Of revenue. And so this year it was $2,009. And we were able to get that $209,000, sorry.
$200 to $250 a year.
Yeah.
Correct. And this year it was 209 and they approved giving us that money to help.
Well,
improve
that's
the
not
park.
small potatoes.
It's very helpful.
Sorry, Joel, we're taking some of your time. We met, first of all, today with the investment committee and I didn't bring it up there, but these trust funds now have over $7 million sitting in them. And there's not a lot of visibility by this board as you're questioning today. I would like to propose that we ask the investment committee, we should be getting quarterly reports as the sole beneficiary of a trust. We get those for all of our other trusts. I know other organizations that I've been involved with that are beneficiaries of trust. They get quarterly, at least annually, reports on how it's invested, what it's earned, that sort of thing. We don't get that.
Mr. President, we actually do. And Craig's in constant contact with Greater Cincinnati Foundation. We can provide that for you. But Craig is also monitoring that and we're on top of that, but we can definitely provide that. Sorry.
Just so you know, I've had to ask for that and you went back and got the information. So you're not. My point is, I would like to establish with Greater Cincinnati Foundation that we do have an investment committee that will look at this as our beneficiary in our meetings. So I would like to set that up more formally so we don't have to ask for it and that we get it automatically. If that is not unreasonable to this
It's not.
board.
No, because we have to, every time we add a new member, we've got to learn this stuff. And we only learn it because it happens to come up as a funding source for a volleyball court. And it should be more evident that this is a resource. Just an item for the financial package. We'll get to that discussion.
So then to be clear, what we will do is we will ask the investment committee of the park board to review this on a periodic basis. These trust funds.
Phyllis, I'm not even 3 years in, or I'm almost 3 years in and I'm still learning new things all the time.
Good to know.
Yes.
Sorry, Joel. So we sidetracked.
Will be installed in time for winter. Is that right?
I believe so.
Okay,
We checked with them last week.
by the way.
They might play, I don't know. We checked with them last week and just to make sure their prices were still good because we've held this to make sure the BOV money was going to go through and we know that that is the case. So we know that they're still planning on doing it yet this year.
The only other comment I had on this is that this volleyball equipment was not listed anywhere on the Brandstetter report as maintenance that would be required. So there are items on the Brandstetter report that deal with like ADA and some other things that are listed as poor or fair. So I just bring that up from the standpoint that sometimes I wonder how one thing pops up versus something else that is.
Absolutely. As you all know, we're still prioritizing what we're doing and how we're doing it. With everything, I have limits even within pavement. So there are, as I well am aware, there's several ADA issues throughout the park, but I'm still bound by my term contracts. So we're maximizing as much money as we can to get those things done up to and including part of Washington Park to save the TPA fee, just to get as much ADA and sidewalk work done as we can. So I feel like we're maximizing as many of those fixes as we can in that genre because we're maximizing the amount of money I have available under those terms. But you're absolutely right. As we continue to dive back into Microsoft Project and go through 40 projects where we're going to catalog everything, several of these smaller ADA issues that either were or weren't in the Brandstetter report will rise to the top, and then we'll be able to fund those versus our term contracts. So I'm well aware that sometimes the fixing of the equipment and things may look like we're neglecting something else, but we're also maximizing that pavement term contract that we have at our disposal.
And when Joel mentions the term contract, it's a citywide term contract of which we get a certain percentage. To get into the city minutia, the Department of Transportation was like waiting for it to come out and gobbled it all up. And so we had to spend a month or so to get them to release some of it back to us so that we could get some stuff done. And I want to congratulate Joel on being a point on that. And you got a lot of monies. So it wasn't even about whether we had the funding or not. It was about whether we had the bandwidth within that contract. And Joel was able to get us quite a bit of funding in that you'll see getting deployed over the next several months.
Great, thank you.
But
We're well aware of the ADA issues. It's, as you all know, I'm a transportation engineer. We're working on those every day. And in the next year, as we continue to build out our project management inventory, our asset management inventory, all of those ADA issues we hope will be resolved or at least identified so that they're not popping up versus, you know, there are things that you've heard of and you're well aware of, and we're forecasting when they'll be done.
Great. Okay, so keep us moving along. We've got before us a request from staff to approve expenditure on sand volleyball equipment. So you're seeking approval for that, right, Joel?
Yes, sir.
So we've got before us a request for approving $65,483, which includes a 10% contingency. Does anybody have any other questions on that? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve. And second, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you all. My next action item on the list is to approve irrigation funds for Washington Park. We've talked about this for several months. In fact, you all approved $250,000 under FY 24 under line item 242000, our infrastructure and rehabilitation fund, to do this work. So we have received quotes from Megan. We've talked to our staff, all of the operations folks that manage this park, to figure out what is the most priority things. We know safety is always paramount and ADA accessibility. We know that. We asked the staff what causes them the most grief and what takes the most of their time and what is their frustration. And the biggest thing we kept hearing over and over was that they spend so much time manually watering both the north and the south ends of Washington Park, to the tune of every time we go without rain for 3 days in the summertime, which is 7 to 8 months, you know, of growing season here, they spend 40 hours a week. Every single instance of that, maybe in the summer, twice a week, just watering manually, filling up buckets, taking them to the north end. Because when the Washington Park irrigation was put in, a drip system, essentially, which pushes water out, but then after time allows silt to come back into the pipes up and fails. So what this proposal before you does is correct those issues with 1.5-inch PVC pipe off of the main and provide our forests and caretakers of our parks a good connection place to where they can quickly water and negate all of the time that they spend and the effort that they spend filling up 250-gallon water trucks in the back of their issues, driving around the parks to fill all these things up, or pulling hoses from a crazy distance away to do that stuff. So we prioritize 2 things under this package that we're asking for approval. The first of which is $141,677 to completely irrigate the north half of Washington Park. With the remaining money, we hope to address a condensed package. I know Andrew Campbell from our office, and we presented a few months ago on a total package of everything maintenance wise that needs to be done at Washington Park. He has condensed that, knowing the cost of that irrigation down to what we think is about $100,000 worth of fixes. And he's in the process of trying to quote that work right now. What I'm asking for today is to allow us to move forward with Megan Construction to do the irrigation work, and also to allow us to not exceed $250,000 total, but to address as much of this pavement as I can under a quote that we're actively searching to get right now.
In talking about the irrigation, do I understand you correctly? They're not going to have to hand water anymore, that there'll be sprinkling systems?
A little of both. So there'll be 2 different ways. One, they can set stands that will shoot up 3 feet, I believe, to the tops of everything. We're setting this system up so they'll do that. All it really means is they can connect right where they have to water with a hose that's very short, instead of having to either drag stuff from 600 feet away or fill up a truck with a 250-gallon tank in the back of it and drive over to those areas. So it makes the water accessible to the area in which they're watering, and saves them apparently 40 hours every time they have to do this by going and driving, filling up the tanks.
I understand all that, but I just made an assumption when you talk about an irrigation system that they're going to be sprinklers that pop out and.
Yes, it will be both. It will be both sprinkles to sprinkle the beds, and then connection points, quick connects for the things that they have to water still.
And so you're axing out the drip irrigation system.
Yes, ma'am. That failed system is already full of silt and it's gone. That is what this is replacing.
Been down that road.
And we priced both ends of the park, like, to find out what everything would cost and see if there was any efficiency by doing them both. There really wasn't any efficiency north and south together. Like, we weren't getting a 15 to 20% cost savings to do both of them at once. And the staff overwhelmingly supported the north as a problem issue for them. So That's why we're prioritizing that. With the rest of the money, we're gonna fix a whole lot of the pavement issues. There's a step that's got a huge chunk out of it at the pavilion. There's several other areas in there where things are over a 1/2 inch differential settlement in the walk. We're gonna have those either fixed, taken out and fixed, or jacked, mud jacked if possible, to bring them back into level. We'll use both techniques as people tell us to, as they advise us to do that. And we won't go over $110,000 this year with those fixes.
Any questions on this? I do want to say this is great where you put together a full plan for the park so that it's all, a broad picture of what needs to be done. So congratulations on doing that.
So you add staff, Andrew gets to focus on those kind of things, and that's invaluable to someone running around for 50 projects to have those folks focusing on that and really knowing what they're doing from a preservation standpoint. So I appreciate the thorough work of my team.
Any other questions related to this request for approval of the up to $250,000? If not,
that's fine.
Does the South have a similar irrigation?
It does. It is failed.
I'm sorry.
It is also failed in the same manner, and they do still have to water that. It was just the total cost of doing both of those was approaching the total cost of money we had to do this year. We had to prioritize safety issues and ADA issues. So we didn't want to spend all of our money, even though it's a detriment to our staff. The huge detriment is the north side. So
Is that something that will have to be done in the future or?
in the last budget cycle, commissioners approved $250,000 under FY 24 and $150 under FY 25 for improvements to Washington Park, to include both irrigation and safety improvements. So we're spending the $250 this year on these two things, and we'll evaluate over the next few months what we're going to do with the $150, whether that be irrigating the south half. Are there more pressing, ADA issues that need to be addressed and safety issues within the park? That will happen over this winter to find out what we should be doing next year.
Well, and it comes to mind that just talked about Smale, and it was a 10-year. It's been 10 years that's been, and the systems that were installed may not be the most efficient long-term from a maintenance standpoint. We've seen the same thing here. Washington Park wasn't that long ago that was totally redone. So thank you for being on staff here. And I would encourage you, now that you're dealing with the problems from the past, to obviously bear that in mind as we do new things, that obviously that we're thinking about whoever's coming after you or coming after us will not be faced with the same type of thing. And I know you can't always be perfect, and hindsight is perfect, but it is an example of really thinking through when something new is put in, is it the best approach long term from a maintenance standpoint?
We'll always value engineer things, but not to the detriment of folks 20 years down the line from us. If you're going to take membranes out of potting beds that somebody 20 years from now is going to have to rip the whole wall apart to put back together, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay, so any other questions on the Washington Park funding? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
And second. So we have a motion and approval to approve the staff request, $250,000 for maintenance at Washington Park. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. I believe the rest of my items are updates, and a couple of them are getting you ready for things we're going to bring to you in the next couple months. Let's see. Some quick notes on.
Things looking good.
Oh, sorry, Molly.
Move-in date, your DNR building.
That's a great question. So the great news is that Megan has already moved their construction trailer off site and are working out of the building. They're almost padded out, which means the ceiling is almost complete. We're getting real close to where Chris is already talking about temporary occupancy and how we can give Crystal as much time as possible to move as much material as possible, maybe even before the December 1st date. So we're in great shape. Ludlow, as far as update, I included a few pictures just to show you all what's going on. The outside is almost completely done. All of the pavement work was done this month. Adlita did a phenomenal job. They fixed 3 parts of the wall. They widened the pavement on the egress side such that all of that is a straight line now, and our trucks don't have to zigzag through that edge. All of that stuff is looking great. We asked you last month for up to $110,000 for the fence. We received quotes back this week that Chris McGee is working through to finalize and make sure we're on the same page, but it's looking like that's going to be less than $70,000. So we were $40,000 We had to budget based on what we thought it was going to be, based on what the engineer's estimates were, but good news so far on that. Also, we had a pre-construction meeting and a pre-bid meeting with two individuals that are interested in bidding the building, the construction building. So we're in the process of bidding that as well, and bids are due for that this Friday. We expect 2 bids. We'll bring that to you all next month for approval of the building. And that's the last piece from a planning and design standpoint of contracts that have to be completed. So on schedule and under budget.
Great.
You all have any questions about Ludlow? I know there's a whole lot going on. The pictures that she's showing, that just shows you the before and after of the stairs, and those big boxes of ceiling tiles that are all going in right now. Smells brand new inside, so makes you smile when you go in now.
That picture doesn't do it justice. As Commissioner Norris said, it looks really nice.
I want to say a special thanks to Chris McGee for keeping on top of that project. It was not easy. Had a great contractor. Megan Construction's done a great job on that and project management. So great team, and happy to be a part of it.
Apparently we have police officers that used to work out of there that stopping by and are like,
Jealous. They never did this for us.
so. But at some time, we could definitely record of it, or we could have some sort of, we could either wait till folks moved in and kind of settled, or if you wanted to see it when it was still empty. I know it's always fun to see a new home before you put all the furniture in and all the dirty laundry in the corners. So just let us know and we can be happy to take folks out to check it out. It looks really good. I would point out just all these photos are great, but the 2 photos of the underside of the steps where you really see what the underside of the steps look like. And even this photo doesn't do it justice because they've since it's dried and it just looks brand new rather than like you patched over some exposed rebar, which is just amazing.
You'll have any more questions on Ludlow?
Nope.
Right.
Next one.
The biochar.
Just to tell you what the machine is.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
You all hear so much about it. We figured we'd show you what it actually is. So what you're looking at there, Mrs. Castellini, is
No news on it.
depends on what you want to know. I can tell you what's happened with biochar in the last month. We actually had a site visit early in October with the gentleman that is on the biochar vendor team that was the selected contractor that provided that equipment. He came from Canada to order, and we looked at the whole site kind of to investigate, as we were talking to you all about, maybe we put it in the horse stable, maybe we don't, maybe there's another spot on site that's more advantageous. So we walked the site with both the conveyor folks who help get the chips from wherever we store them into the machine in 2 different spots. We met with both that person and the person that provides that PRD right there, the unit itself. Just to talk through logistics of the site. We think that the very eastern edge of the site, adjacent to the existing boiler room, is going to be most advantageous to where to put biochar, not in the horse stable building.
Interesting.
Because just because the grades really don't work on the horse stable building. We have great news on the horse stable building also, though. As we told you last time, I think we had asbestos testing done across the whole facility to see how bad it was going to be to remediate it. Should we have to make major modifications? All of the stuff inside of those 2 WPA buildings came back as non-asbestos. So we don't have those issues. There are shelvings in some of if you look at the corrugated shelves, they're tan in color. If you go downstairs in some of the buildings, those contain asbestos, but our certified industrial hygienist consultant told us that as long as those don't get broke, cracked, or whatever, we can still use them with no issues to our staff whatsoever, as they've been used for 50 years. So most of the remediation stuff that we thought we were going to have to do that would cost big money, we don't have to do. But not to say that it's going to, save us $1 million on anything like that, but it certainly weighs against our decision whether or not to use those buildings and how we can use them for staff occupied spaces. So
Any news on the access road?
We're still working through that with the Springfield Township. So one of the things you can see in your documents, they'll show you the site plan. The area that Joel's talking about, this was the old WPA building that the horse stables were originally considered. But just looking at how big that building was and talking to the folks, it might be more expensive to do it there. And so we're now exploring potentially putting it in this area here next to where the power source is. And the reason for that is that if this is where the boiler is, it does the heat for the entire greenhouse system.
Right.
If we put the biochar next to that, and then the boiler that will be part of the biochar, because it's heated with that heat from the biochar, it's much shorter to go right into there. Additionally, because we're looking at two different routes for the electrical, this is the road we'll get the electrical off of. That if we put the biochar there, then it's much closer to that as well, which means if it's producing energy and back into the grid, it will shorten that distance as well. And so, that's a decent distance of running power and electrical, because this is that three-phase electrical that'll be really expensive.
To the tune of $100,000 to do it.
We're still considering all this, but you can at least see how our thinking is evolving as we walk through the whole thing.
So you're anticipating, if you did that, having to build a new building to house biochar?
So the interesting thing about the biochar is that with this new vendor, it could technically just be outside, but then that's just not the best for it, right? Long term, if we want this machine to last as long as possible. But it could just go in a corrugated shed, right? It doesn't need a fancy building. The one we saw when we went to Missouri was just in like what's the word I'm looking for? Pole barn.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
The floor, but
Yeah,
we're always looking to reuse our buildings. And so that was kind of our first thought, was like, we got a building right here. What can we do to reuse this? And we were really excited about that as an option. Obviously, you guys walked through it with us on our tour. But then as we looked at it, if it's more efficient, if it's cheaper, if it's closer to the power, if it's closer to the power source to get that heated water in there, there's starting to be just a lot of advantages, and which doesn't mean we can't use the WPA building and the horse stables for something else in the future.
the logistics of access around that existing building it does bring to light, unfortunately, biochar now is married with the concept of what do we do with water?
Mm-hmm.
So I would just continue to encourage you to come up with, because what is the overall plan?
Yes.
For this? You can't totally get into total logistic costs and all that until you know exactly where it's going to go, what the building is. So unfortunately, we're sort of, I won't say treading water with biochar, but
I think what we're doing is we're taking the time to do it right. And I think that's the most important thing that I've heard in talking to you guys. It's the most important thing, I think, just in making sure this is successful. One of the first things I said to our team was that we're not building biochar for 2023 or 2024 or even 2025. We're building biochar for 20, 30, 50 years to be leader on this and to grow big, beautiful trees. And so we're gonna make sure we get it right.
And to add, the scope on the project has evolved over time as federal funding opportunities have evolved. So we met with the World Resource Institute representatives from the World Resource Institute yesterday to discuss the combined heat and power IRA funding opportunities, which could reimburse up to 30% of the entire project. And so they're connecting us with an entity that does a pro bono lawyer that specifically works on these types of funding to tell us exactly what elements of our project are applicable for a reimbursement. So the whole concept of putting it right next to the existing boiler room is that we'll be able to mitigate the cost of heat the greenhouses every year. So currently about $40,000 a year just to get for electricity on site. And so where it may be treading water in that we haven't brought the full package forward, there are so many elements that are moving along in this behind the scenes. And a lot of it thanks to Joel's team and the work that they're doing and our partnership with Complete Solutions, who is providing us the gear.
so at current, to add to what Crystal said, there's a ton of stuff going on behind the scenes, several of which I just want to thank DOTE for helping us. They've offered to come out and survey some things as we look at these electrical potential routes and things like that. You can see that some of the buildings to the lot just to the south of that get pretty close. So establishing exact and correct property boundaries in those areas is critical to make sure we can do what we say we're going to do in these situations. So getting all that stuff ironed out first to make sure when we bring you costs, they're accurate and they're actually attainable is very important. Like Jason said, to make sure we're not bringing you stuff that's half cooked. So we're also working on that end of the building now that we've had this site meeting with the folks that provide the equipment to get grades and lay out a site over by the boiler room to make sure that the conveyance systems will work as we think they're going to. That will be a discussion piece over the next couple of months as we work with the vendor to make sure we're maximizing what we do with that whole barn building around our biochar shed.
I think by the time we bring it back to you, we have pretty substantial capital costs for installation, as well as clarity on the IRA funding and permitting that's required to get the operation on.
And I appreciate that you all look at it from a water campus standpoint, because that's exactly how our shop has looked at it from the get-go. We're looking at what it takes to run water. We're looking at the system that Crystal was talking about and the inefficiencies and how we heat the greenhouses and upcoming projects, that what would we need to do to get all that up to snuff? So it is an ongoing cycle. We're working through temporary conditions for Ann and the green space team. All of that is moving forward as well. So those three components, the green space team, temporary relocation, biochar, and water campus as a whole, is really what we're working on and focusing on and trying to make sure that all those work in conjunction.
Great.
Any more questions on water or biochar?
No, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is pretty much what I expected it to look like, but I was thinking about trains.
This is an evolution from the train conversation.
Okay.
Being produced three
Train
times.
like.
It's train like, it's just got all of the little trains, the capacity built in. We're talking about, oh, we do one train, which is two trains, which is three trains. This one has three times the capacity of the one unit.
Are we at any risk with the Bloomberg dollars? Is there a time on this funding that?
We met with them a couple months ago. There are timelines associated with the grant dollars, but the Bloomberg folks have made clear to us that they're interested in successful projects and the time they want to see progress. And they're really excited about the progress we have, up to including talking about potentially a visit at some point. Interestingly, one of the Bloomberg guys has family connections in Mason. And so, they're committed to helping us make this project right. And they're really excited about how this has grown in scope and how it's kind of going to have an even broader impact on the park system and our operations. So really positive feedback from them.
Good.
The Bloomberg representatives actually connected us to the representatives from the World Resource Institute to get into the depths of the IRA funding. So I think one of the pinch points in the timeline will be that federal funding as the feds evolve and change, and elections are coming, right? So they're trying to get as much of this IRA funding out as possible. So based on those, the combined heat and power dollars that would be available to us, as long as we have we break ground within 2025, we could potentially get that reimbursement that following tax season.
Which can then be part of the capital stack for the whole project. So not only do you have $40,000 a year in potential energy savings, but you can get the tax rebate of 30 to 40%, depending on kind of some of the check marks on the funding opportunities. So it could really be a positive thing for us.
Next one I had on my list to update you all on was Lytle Park, coming to a close. They are seeding as we speak. So the whole half of the park that's over the tunnels is seeded already, and they're working their way towards 4th Street, pretty much cleaning up as they go. They've done some cool things that I haven't seen before. Instead of using a filter sock along their sidewalks to catch silt, they used sod, which is awesome because that's already established your edges, and then everything else behind it is seeded. So which is better for your, essentially better than sod, to actually have a yard that's seeded individually. So they're doing a great job on that. The playground is already in. Thanks to Chris McGee, we've got some really awesome drone photos there. You can see the playground at that point was almost all the way in, but the turf and all the X grass and the protective surfacing and all that this week. So it's almost 100% complete right now.
Well, is the herb garden, is that the one across along the drive there?
It's adjacent to the Autograph Hotel restaurant. And we've met with those folks. Nick and Scott did a great job talking through the folks with the herb garden. They're working through those details right now as exactly where it was. We gave them more space than they wanted.
Yeah.
We're working through those details right now on the landscaping plants.
We made some happy neighbors there with that.
Always like to do that.
Great.
So everything's going in right now. Pavers running track is already down. I walked on it this week. It's awesome. I can't wait to run on it when it's done. It's going to be really, really nice. The change order is approved. Thanks to Craig and Jason for their help, making sure all of that stuff goes through for the 4th Street lighting. Chris is working to make sure that that's in conjunction timing wise. They're starting on that very soon.
What's the timing for the trees to go in along 4th Street?
Great question. We are working right now to finalize the Ann Magnolia trees that are along the promenade coming from Taft. That's one of 2 trees that we're still working to source. The others is cherries. I think there are 8 of those. Chris McGee's working on that with the vendor today. They've had a lot of problems finding a couple of the species of trees. So thankfully, we know some folks that can do that. So some of those we've actually pulled back into our shop to find better trees than what we're
doing. Magnolia and cherry down that.
There are several different species, but Ann Magnolia is certainly along the promenade from the Taft. I know that certainly for sure.
Great.
I'm not exactly sure where the cherries go, but I know it's a homage to the ones that were around the original. So,
Good time of year to do it, though. This is the time of year to plant
Exactly.
a tree.
yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
We actually let them wait to get fall dug trees because we know it's going to be better quality in a lot of cases. So
I have my doubts, but I was by there a couple of days ago and you can actually see green in the where it's been seeded in the open field there.
yeah, they did a great job. They actually hydro-seeded it, not just straw mulch, which means that binder actually keeps the seed even during some rains. So it's a much better chance for that grass to establish correctly.
So unless the spray was green, it looked
Spray is green, actually, Commissioner, but yeah, it's probably still some
probably saw the spray. Never mind.
grass as well, because there's definitely grass along the edges with the sod and all that. So
Phyllis, you're keeping an eye on this, aren't you, for us? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I should point out that as we proceed towards everything getting finished, right? The change order just got finished. We'll be doing the lighting and the sidewalk work in November, December. We expect kind of the construction to be done early January. And at which point, well, obviously, we still have 3 months to go. We don't know. This is just very tentative, but tentatively, we think we could be ready for a soft opening sometime in January, which was where some of the construction pins would come down. And then likely still restrict access to the planted areas. The key thing with this is to get the grass to grow really well, to get that to really settle in, to get the trees to grow really well. And so we would likely have some like limited areas where we would allow some access, but we'd have the lawn areas restricted until we get to springtime. That will give 2 kind of full grow seasons to allow the grass to really settle in and really look awesome. Which we haven't always done in rolling out new parks. Sometimes we rolled that out a little too quickly. And so we want to make sure we really give this grass a chance to settle in and succeed.
Great. Okay, Joel, what's next?
the next one I have for you all is the Art Museum Drive, and an update on Eden Park and what DOTE is doing. Rich Bohanna of DOTE reached out a couple weeks ago and said they're getting pretty close on their plans. As you all know, we had some structural investigation that happened last summer to try to figure out the best place to put pier walls, minimizing any impact to the surrounding vegetation. So right up front, we talked to DOT about that and expressed our concerns to minimize any loss of any big trees. And I know Garrett has been on site several times with those folks to try to do such. The results and what you see here is, in my opinion, about a 70% plan that shows just the overall gist of the plan view of what's happening. If you look at page 59 in your packet, it shows you the transition at the Art Museum Drive from a 5-foot sidewalk up to an 8, and that continues all the way up the hill. That's a really, really bad sight distance area.
That's 83 in our packet.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jason, my bad.
No worries.
Different.
We added the conservation stewardship presentation at the last minute.
Printed too late. Too early. So yeah, they're essentially going to an 8-foot wide sidewalk there. There is minimal to no additional intrusion into the park to fit this wall in. So at additional expense, they've done this poured concrete pier wall to ensure that we're saving as many trees as absolutely possible. DOTE has received a grant in the amount of $1.127 million to cover most of this project. They anticipate in their engineer's estimate that it's going to be $1.409 million. So that our match would be half of the difference. 281 is that difference. So our match would be $141,000 if the engineer's estimate is correct. In reviewing these plans, Rich has advised, DOTE has advised me to alert you all that if it's a couple $100,000 more, we may be asked to spend up to $200,000 in our match. So we're asking today, not for an approval, but just to make you all aware that that ask is going to be coming. We anticipate having final plans either next month or in December for your review and actual numbers with that as it bids. But we wanted to make you aware of that. Essentially, we're spending $150,000 to get a $1.5 million renovation done to the park. It's in great need. One other thing I want to point out and ask for consideration on in this is because DOTE worked with us so well, because they're covering all of the costs of the consultant, because they went out to get the grant, the few trees that are going to be impacted, we're asking that we waive any fee, not charge ourselves or assess them for that value, in that they've already contributed so much to the project and we're getting a $1.5+ million benefit. So No one has to act on that today. I just want to, that is what the crux of that project is, that will be developed to 100% over the next 60 days.
Changing that sidewalk width is going to be so valuable to our.
That's the question. So did you say, do they put in a wall? They drop in a wall?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, because I wonder, because right now it just goes straight down.
That's right. So they're going to drill concrete casings, probably 2 feet. I'm not sure. They probably show it. If you look at the picture that's on the screen right now, it shows those drilled piles.
That's
That's
okay.
what those are.
That's engineer.
Yes, drilled piles, and they have rebar inside of them. They just fill them full of concrete. It's one of the strongest walls that they can make. It's the
That
easiest.
will be such an addition.
Anybody that's run or walked through there's so many curves, so many blind curves. The trees create weird shadows. It's just going to be a huge safety improvement.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
At our request, they've also agreed to wrap the nice guardrails that you see going up towards Crone. We're going to change the style of these to match those. So it goes all the way down to the gazebo. It all looks the same. You can't use a wood backing for these just because of the drilled pier height, but essentially the backs of them will be tube steel, 4-inch tube steel, super strong, guardrail ready, but the fronts will still be the treated wood to match the look and the aesthetic of the rest of the park as we go around, but it'll still be vehicle rated, right? Right. So those are the improvements, and no need to act on that today. We just wanted to make you aware of that project before I come and ask you for something you haven't heard about in 6 months. Any questions on that one?
No, right?
Awesome.
Really necessary too.
Couple more quick updates for things. International Friendship Park, we're still in the final stages of reviewing and adding comments, making sure that everything is good to go as far as how we're going to procure plants and things before we go out with works to bid that project. We anticipate this bidding by the end of the year and going under construction to rebuild International Friendship next year. We're hoping to get everything kind of in the same timeline that you see Lytle right now, to where we're doing the hardscape early in the year through the summer and give yourself the best planting window possible for the big trees and civic grasses next year. So we'll keep you updated as we turn that back over to Waterworks to work through bidding on that, but that will all happen before we see you all again. Another one that's come up, I wasn't aware of this before this month, and it's not 100% stop, but I wanted to make you aware of it as we fixed a few sanitary sewers last year. We're kind of going through that same cycle this year to make sure all of our facilities are in working order. So Andy Sherman showed me a couple issues, one at the Doris Day Mount Airy Dog Park and one at McFarland Park involving sanitary sewer. I walked both of those lines. I don't know if there's a clog or what has happened with that, but at least half of those I know are still in good working order because I've seen it run. The intent here is not to go spend $250,000 for no reason to fix everything and anything when that may not be the best use of our money and may not warrant that with the amount of use that they get. So we're at least looking into minimally invasively what is wrong with the pipes. Are they blocked somewhere? We're going to have them televised under an initial contract to inform what needs to be done. Then we can decide how big of a project those are. But just to make you aware, I have been made aware of some issues. They still work. They're flushing the toilets, but at some point, when you get heavy rains and you still get a lot of usage in the park, those could overflow down into the storm sewer. We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure all of our stuff works well. So we're investigating that now and just wanted to make you aware of those.
Coming attractions, if you will.
Yep, coming attractions. That's exactly right.
Coming to a theater near you.
Commissioners, I think that is all of the updates I have for you, unless you have any other questions on a specific. I'm happy to answer.
Really well done.
Thank you, ma'am.
See you all.
Appreciate it.
Ian, you'll have all those knocked out by the next meeting.
Already done. Already working on it. Thank you all.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
You're really.
Okay.
I mean, we've added an engineer and Matt, and now Ian. We've added Andrew Campbell as an architect. The team's just since I've been here, the team's really built out. We got a couple of co-op interns that are flying along. It's just, you can really see how it's starting to pick up the pace.
Well, and Joel, I like the balance that you're addressing with pure maintenance as well as some of the new fancy things like the Lytle Park. So it's, as Jason always reminds us, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and this to-do list is an example of that. So
one thing I forgot to address today is, as you all know, we've been working towards prioritization and making sure that we're doing the right things with our money. Jason and I, Matt DeBona, and several folks on our team are working through Microsoft Project now. We've been back and forth with Planner and Project, and to give you all what you want to see, which is essentially a chart of when things should be happening and what phase they're going to be in. That is the tool we think is going to be best used. So we're in process right now of populating that, making that so that you will have schedules for at least 40 of our biggest projects, the ones you're going to be asked about the most. And everything else will be categorized in a similar manner, just probably not as robust as their shorter term projects, but you should be draft of those over the next couple of months or.
Perfect. Thank you.
So just to piggyback on that, you might have seen in a first draft of the agenda that there was potentially a discussion of a 3-year forecast. We were hoping to have something that might not be as complex as the Microsoft Planner project, but something more of an Excel spreadsheet level that wasn't quite ready. And we always make sure things are well cooked. But I would imagine sending that to you in the next week or so, hopefully. My thought would be to get that to you now. It's basically like an extension of the plan of work, which we passed last December, right? Early days of my tenure. And then the idea would be we'd get that to you sometime in October. We'd be able to have a discussion about it at the November meeting. No decisions being made, just a discussion, any feedback you've had, then have a further kind of revision of it and discussion of it with then a passage of it in December is kind of like again, it's not something that we have to stick to, but it's kind of we're telling the public, this is what we're up to. This is what we think the plans are. This is how everything fits together to understand kind of what the scope of what we're working on this year, next year, and the following year, and kind of projects that are then in the hopper for the future. So.
Okay, you've got HR up.
Correct. So I thought Derek was at the Civil Service Commission, but it turns out that he is out sick today. Apparently something is going around. But I'll run down a couple things real quick. First of all, I just want to point out that at long last, our understanding is that this morning at Civil Service Commission, they are approving the changes in classifications for the senior administrative specialist and the administrative specialist, which will now allow those to have open qualifications and us to be able to hire from outside of the city system or from within the city system, but it will give us this new option. Those jobs will be posted here in the next couple of days. I think it takes some time for them to upload those into the system, but we have 4 jobs ready to post almost immediately that we're really excited about. One is the grant writer, which we passed money for in January, and we're finally going to get to post it. But we think it's really important to be able to select from anywhere and everywhere to get the best person for that. 2 is a second administrative specialist for the director's office to support Jenny and I. That position would be more of an office manager or administrative assistant. And then 2 for Joel Shop. 1 would be an administrative assistant that would do kind of that office manager role. And then another one that would be a project manager that wouldn't necessarily be an engineer or an architect, but would be somebody that would be able to take some of these projects that they put the science and math behind, but then run out and do them. So they can show up and make sure the contractor's doing it. They can kind of follow some of the bidding. They can do some of the community engagement around projects that we're getting ready to do. So for instance, the Doris Day Dog Park. Joel or Ian could go out and get contractors and bids to do project XYZ, but we might want somebody that can meet with our friends that showed up here today, talk to some folks that do that community engagement, and then manage that project. Because it's not a project that necessarily involves an engineering degree to know how to put down the new playground equipment or to know how to put in a new, if we're going to do a concrete path or if we're going to do some new, there's things that they can help with that. So those are 2 new positions, again, to support Joel Shop, a second position in the director's office. And then I'm also excited to note that we, 2 weeks ago, we posted an administrative assistant for the director's office to support Jenny and I. That's more of a project manager. That will be more of that external facing role. That job in 2 weeks has got over 120 applicants already. So when you post something externally that allows someone to get in and really help make a difference in parks, it gets a huge response to it. And we're really excited that over the next couple of months, we're going to add a lot more to our team just because of that one change.
And Joe, where is that? Jason, where is that on here? If you've got the grant writer, then you've got 3, which is 1.
Those 3 administrative specialists. Yeah. So those will be, and then there's 1 that's currently posted. It might be short one. So there'll be a total of 4 administrative specialists, and then the senior administrative specialist is the grant writer.
Okay. So there's 4, not 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what I was confused about.
We are, to get in the weeds a bit, we are redefining Craig's shop a little bit in order to free up that second administrative specialist for the director's office. And what we're going to do with that, the office manager role, is we're going to cross train on both HR stuff, policies, procedures, and finance stuff to be kind of a jack of all trades to help us support a lot of that we don't necessarily need an extra full-time person in either job, but this person will be able to assist and help support that.
Okay.
So just to run through this really quickly, we've had a long meeting. Engineering intern is on board. We just recently promoted Christopher Alexander to be a service crew leader. Raymond Clater, who you've met, has been promoted to senior accountant from his previous position of accountant. That's the position we're now moving then over to be a senior administrative specialist. We just hired Lamont Hill to be a maintenance crew leader. You'll remember Lamont Hill because he sat on the committee that interviewed me. And so I was really excited to get to call him and offer him a job of a promotion, which was really neat. He's been with us for a while and is really a rock star. And then we also just promoted Doug Frisch in the urban forestry. He would have been a florist in urban forestry, has been with us for a while, has really grown and evolved in that time. And then when there was an opening for our urban forestry specialist, he was the best candidate of all the candidates we had. We've also added 2 laborers and electrician. We've added 2 administrative technicians that are helping us at both Crone and on Craig's team in finance. And then you can see the positions I just discussed, which are the ones that are coming through, and then additional positions that we're adding, which are the ones that we added in the budget process in June, which are 3 new florists, 2 new laborers, the trail technician, which will be more of a project manager that would, again, help with that contracting, community relations, an extra maintenance crew leader. So all these positions move forward, the GIS analyst, and they're all starting to happen. So he's not here to receive the accolades, but Derek Shop's really starting to turn over these new positions and get more folks in here. And there's just a lot of energy surrounding all of that we're really excited about.
Any questions on? So we're to the director's comments.
All right, let me find my spot in the paper here. Excellent. So a couple things real quick. One, just last week, we mentioned this before, but just last week, Sarah Moskowitz, who is the head of our social media. As you know, our social media was ranked 3rd best park social media of the 100 biggest cities in the country. She was invited to speak at the National Recreation Park Association meeting in Dallas, Texas. And she went and spoke there. Unofficially, she said they've already talked to her about potentially coming back. So apparently she crushed it. So just a really cool honor for us to get somebody invited to speak at that level. And as part of that, we just passed 50,000 followers on Instagram, which is just a giant number. I mean, it's not Taylor Swift kind of numbers, but for a park system, 50,000 followers is really impressive. And I'm sure you are. I'm constantly hearing from folks that are telling us, hey, I just saw this, or hey, I just that. I don't even know what it is because I don't have Instagram myself, but I'm constantly hearing cool things about our parks from my friends that are enjoying what Rocky's team's putting out. Sunday is the end of First Flowers. First Flowers is our prehistoric flowers show that's been at Crone Conservatory. It has brought in over $350,000. I think beating Prismatica, which was a really innovative show last year. Just another huge success at Crone. Golden Days of Yule, which is the holiday show, opens November 11th. So we have a couple of weeks of turnaround, and then they're shooting that back out or open that back up for everybody's just favorite time of year to enjoy Crone Conservatory. We have a ton of volunteer events going on.
Can I ask you something on Crone with hearing crushing it and everything? When you look at our revenues, though, it's not reflective in the Crone is taking in that type of revenue. We're 0.5% ahead of budget, which is, when you look at it, it's a very small number.
You were on
with our projections, we increased 5 years. So right now they're all.
So
versus how they perform prior years. So prior years, we would budget at 1.4 million in revenue. Now we budgeted at 1.8 million.
okay,
which is still under the 2.1 we had last year.
okay. So you're saying that we already had goosed the budget. So this was anticipated. So we're doing what we had anticipated doing at Crone.
Well, very well, but we anticipated it. First last year, we went above the budget because we did not anticipate the increase in revenue. We were conservative in our targets.
Gotcha.
So this is over projection versus over the previous year of that. So in fiscal year 22, we had 1.4 million in revenue. In fiscal year 23, which ended June 30th, we had 2.1. We don't anticipate doing 40% revenue increase every year, but while we didn't project 2.1 again next year, because just in case it was a blip, we do hope that we can match what last year's numbers were. The other thing about Crone is that the shows vary in size. And so the holiday show and the butterfly show are the biggest ones. And then the winter show and the, I think it's called the summer show, even though it's in October, are the shows that don't do as well. But again, we've achieved record sales on those. So we can certainly do up a report that shows kind of the history of Crone over the last 4 or 5 years, which takes us back to kind of COVID days, which resets everything.
Just like success in any business, once you get a mark, we're gonna expect that.
Onward and upward. So, volunteers, Owl's Nest is holding a volunteer day on October 27th from 9 to 1. Walnut Woods of Evanston is doing a tree planting on October 28th from 9 to 12. We also have, speaking of the invasive species that we saw a review of, we have a ton of events. This is the best time of year to attack honeysuckle as it starts to die and go dormant for the winter months. So we have events coming up at Wilson Commons, Miles Edwards, Alms Park, California Woods, La Buedo Woods, Burnett Woods, and more. So just a ton of volunteer opportunities for folks that are inspired by seeing the Conservation Stewardship Program earlier in the meeting, and want to get involved. There's a lot of stuff coming up they can check the website out for. We also have a ton of events. In fact, so many that I asked Rocky, I was like, where's this one? Because I just heard about it. And he's like, I mean, I got you 4 or 5 awesome ones, but some great events that are coming up. We've got just tonight, we have a night in the trees. So relief, the trees are getting picked up tonight, Saturday, and then again, Monday is the final day. Tonight at Mad Tree from 6 to 9 is a night in the trees. They light up the trees that are there with some lights. It's kind of a cool event. But we're inviting our whole parks team to go up and have a happy hour and kind of enjoy it, but it should be a really fun night. Noting again that 1/3 of the trees were targeted for our low-income canopy neighborhoods. So this is just another great program we do every year. Fall Fest at Burnett Woods is this Saturday from 1 to 6. Pumpkin carving, music, nature crafts, creepy crawlers, and more. Hollow West is at Maple Ridge Lodge in Mount Airy on October 28th from 2 to 6. Campfire on the Bluff at California Woods is October 27th at 7 p.m. Rocky points out that we normally don't encourage fires in our parks, but this is an event that includes storytelling on fire and is put on specifically by us. So we allow it. I should also point out that tomorrow night and then Saturday, we've got Halloween costume character hike in Caldwell Preserve, which should be really cool. There's all kinds of people in costumes that are out on the hike. There's like there's little lanterns throughout the hike to light it up. I asked our team, I was like, so what, like Marvel superheroes, scary costumes? And they're like, no, of course, this is parks. They are nature costumes. So it's folks in nature costume and stuff like that. That'll be really fun for kids to attend. And then 2 biggies. On November 3rd, we have the rededication of the reconstituted Capitoline Wolf statue. Just up the hill from here. It's going to be at 10 a.m. at Twin Lakes. We're super excited about that. Ginny and I went out the other day to kind of give it a site review, and sure enough, the guy that's restoring the marble plinth was there. You might have seen the article in the paper about that recently. And then, of course, an annual tradition that I just got to enjoy for the first time this year or last year, which is the pumpkin chuck at Stanbury Park. My 7-year-old nephew was very unimpressed, but I was fascinated to watch the catapults or the trebuchets launch pumpkins down the hill at Stanbury Park. And then just to note, because we were talking about dog parks, and I love dogs, but the SPCA is going to do a adoption event at City Hall today from 11 to 1. And so I just want to mention that to everybody. I'm excited to go down and go pet some puppies, make my dog jealous a little bit at lunchtime. So starting about 20 minutes ago. So if you're in the market for a puppy and you're watching online, head to City Hall and you have a chance to pet a bunch of dogs and cats and potentially take one home and give it its forever home. And that concludes my.
We've asked about this, if we can get a methodology for informing us ahead of time. I mean, to hear today about things going on tonight, obviously these things aren't planned 24 hours in advance. So if we can get at the beginning of the month or sometime prospectively looking rather than just the calendar of events that is on the website anyway. It's more these events that I think we would like to know about ahead of.
On a pretty good schedule of that, and I don't know what happened. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So make sure we do that.
Yeah.
And I should point out, there was one more thing that I wanted to point out, and this was a late addition, but we got another award. So Crystal's here. Crystal was up in Cleveland last week this is from the Center for Regenerative Solutions. So a sexy name, but what they do is they bring folks together from all across the nation to talk about ways to accelerate natural solutions to climate change, focus on community building and equity. We were selected to join a cohort. This was like a year ago, Crystal. And Crystal's been on that cohort, helping to learn stuff, share strategies. She was up in Cleveland recently, and what she shared with me was she was quite surprised to find out exactly how big the cohort was or how prestigious cities. But these are all the top cities in the country that were involved. They were one of the 20 best cities in the country as far as coming up with creative solutions to basically to manage our urban forests, right? So our street trees, but also our trees and parks and stuff like that. So just another way we're getting recognized for being on the cutting edge. We'll add it to our shelf of awards behind you. But
congratulations, Crystal.
Vanguard City.
Vanguard City.
Great.
Sounds great,
Pretty piece of wood too.
right?
It's nice.
We can serve like cheese and crackers on it.
We actually led to two different presentations, one on how we do climate safe neighborhoods and the work that we're doing with building kind of climate advisory groups. And the other was on the biochar project.
Yeah. That's one. So exciting.
And this is another one where we're partnering with the city's Office of Environment Sustainability and also Groundwork Ohio River Valley, who helps us with our green team and our youth employees every year. So just some great partners helping to make this happen.
Love the leadership.
Great. Well, now we're at a point where we've got open commissioner discussion and comments. So bring it on. Open discussion.
I don't have anything because it's all been covered.
Great. That's good to know.
Extremely rare. I have nothing.
Wow. Great.
Extremely rare.
Anything, Phyllis? Yep. Well, I think just once again, thanks. What we've heard today is exciting. I want to emphasize again, Crystal and your team. Just our parks are beautiful. And the more that we can do to preserve them for the next generation and the next generation after that, it's appreciated. Okay, well, with that, if there's nothing more, I am going to adjourn our meeting. Thank you all. Thank all of you. And for the thousands watching online, thank you.